comes to starting at your school, you're either going to be in one of two places. They're either going to give you a classroom or you're going to be asked to be on a cart. If you're on a cart, your first priority is to go and talk to your teachers. Theater is a very, as you know, active art form, and so getting into their rooms, taking a look at the space they have, and finding out what they're comfortable with. It's hard to be in someone else's room, but you have to, in order to have good relationships with your teachers, know what is okay with them and what is not. Have a procedure for how students move their desks so that it's done the same way every time. On my first day of classes, and probably for the first month, we practice that procedure, we time it, we try to make it as fast as we can, and that includes putting their desks back as well. If you're lucky enough to have your own classroom, it's kind of the same idea, except instead of going to the teacher and finding out what their boundaries are, you get to say to yourself, okay, what kind of boundaries do I want in my classroom?
I set my room up in a semicircle with the kids all sitting in the semicircle, and then that leaves me a big open space, and I call that space the stage. And that way I can teach them stage etiquette and how to use the stage. And so even if I'm on the stage, this becomes our stage within the stage.
For me, I like to make sure we have at least one space that's very structured, so I can give instruction, or if the teacher needs to give some instruction for the integrated lesson. For me, I use Velcro dots. They're just set up around my room. I can move them around into different formations depending on what we're doing. But that's kind of this is where we sit, we have a spot, and it's similar to a desk, so I get similar behaviors from the students. And they're expected to sit kind of like they're in a desk. They have to sit still, they have to keep their hands to themselves. Sometimes we're doing free movement activities where we're moving across the room, and so I've just defined for my students at the beginning of the year where are okay places to go. I have a couple tables in my room, so we define, okay, we don't go under the tables. We don't, go back by the teacher's desk. So we just kind of outline boundaries that way for them. And then we have a performance space, which is basically just establishing audience and performer. That doesn't necessarily mean you always have to have the audience sits in this spot and the performers perform in this spot. I just define it as, okay, the audience is being here, and then we can talk about what does an audience do versus what a performer is doing. Just having those defined spaces and those boundaries.
I also have posters on my wall for character development, how to build a character. I have emotion posters and personality posters, mannerisms, occupations, things that the kids can choose from in order to create and build a character. And then, of course, my rules are front and center for them to see.
First, must-have supply. You need some sort of signal to get their attention. Lots of teachers clap. I did that for lots of years, and I found that students stopped responding to it after a while. I don't know why. I think a lot of people use it. So I use chimes. I stole this from another drama teacher because it's a nice soft sound, and it gives them a chance to finish what they're doing. So I ring my chimes 3 times. And the first one is just there, oh, wait, we're wrapping up. But it gives them a chance to finish what they're doing instead of you have to be quiet right now. Because I don't feel like that's necessarily fair if they're working on something. And then they get a second one when they're supposed to be collecting themselves. And by the third one, we're silent, ready for instruction. Along with chimes, it's good to have lots of other signals for your classroom. I also have a drum, and I have very defined things that we do when we hear the drum. Drum time is for movement, not for talking. So they have to move about the space, and they have to do the actions without noise. When the drum stops, sometimes I'll give them something to say or ask them to respond to what's happening, but we never talk when we're using the drum. It's just another procedure. It gives kids structure in a classroom that doesn't always have a lot of structure.
I have a pencil box and a box of highlighters, because you're going to want highlighters to highlight scripts. I also have character cards that I play a lot of activities with. So these I have personality cards, and they have things in them like demure. Some of these words you might have to explain to kids. Paranoid, talkative. So they're all different personality ones, and there's the same with mannerisms, which are little habits we have. Like adjust your hat. If they're not wearing a hat, then they pantomime a hat. Shift your weight. So different mannerisms. There are also occupation cards. And I like to describe occupation not so much as a job, but what occupies your time. Because our kids aren't bankers, and they're not waiters and waitresses, they're not dentists, they're students. They might be avid readers, they might be couch potatoes when they get home, or gamers, so athletes. There's all kinds of things that the kids can consider what occupies their time and not just an occupation. And then I also have emotion cards. These are probably the ones I use most often. Guilty, confident, bashful, frightened, And you can get lists of emotions, lists of any of these things on the internet and create your own cards with them. I suggest laminating them and then asking the children to treat them kindly.
I would avoid having an extensive supply of props and costumes, namely because you want to avoid students getting in their head that this is the place that we do plays, because there's a lot more to theater than just doing plays. But I do like to have those things on hand because costuming and technical theater is part of our art form, and I think students should be allowed to be exposed to it. So I just have hats, I have large pieces of fabric, I have dance scarves, lots of things that can be multi-purpose, and make sure anytime you pull those things out, you have a defined purpose for it. It's not just, oh, let's just pull out costumes today, it'll be fun. It should have a reason behind it. So is it to help communicate whatever idea the students are trying to do a little better? Like when I'm teaching setting, I found it really helpful to throw out the dance scarves so that it's easier to tell where the water is, where the trees are, gives a little color. When we study character, if a student is going to put on a costume, they have to be able to tell me before they pick up their costume why it fits their character.
So in drama, we worry about costumes and we think, oh, we can do drama without costumes. But the kids love costumes. And so having very, very simple costume pieces can help. Just taking a headband and adding ears to it, all of a sudden you have a monkey, right? You can make simple tunics. Now it's best to make these out of material that doesn't unravel at all so that you can you don't have to sew it, but just a simple tunic, putting different characters in different colors is nice, or even colored t-shirts can help. Just a t-shirt they can slip on over their costume. Scarves become great costumes, and you can do so much with a scarf, putting it on different ways, around your neck, or maybe it's going to go around your head somehow. And that's a whole different character than this one, right? So different ways of using a scarf or a shawl, same thing. I'm sure you can find lots of shawls at thrift stores since people don't wear them a lot anymore. So very, very simple as far as costumes go. You can ask the children to bring their own costumes, but sometimes that gets a little lopsided where somebody brings something big and elaborate and somebody else has something very small, and they're looking like, oh, wish I had their costume. So I think it's best to do your own. I mean, it's up to you, but something very, very simple. Occasionally I might have some props to use, but for the most part we pantomime props. So that's one of the things I teach right up front, is how to pantomime, how to visualize those things. Because if you're just waving something in the air, nobody knows what this is. But if you can see it, and you know what you're doing there, and you can see your fishing rod, or whatever you're doing. So if you're visualizing it, it becomes much more real than just throwing things around in the air. So teach your students how to pantomime, and props become something that are not really necessary. Well, my very first day is not typical of my other days. My very first day, like any other teacher, you've got to go over your rules and procedures. They need to know that when they come into my class, they're going to pick up their name tag, they're going to pick up their clip, then they're going to find a seat. So those procedures, when they come in, I go over my classroom rules for the first time. And I might intersperse a game in between the rules so that we're doing some kind of drama activity, We'll go over rule number 1, then we'll start a drama activity that will continue after rule 2 and after rule 3. And then the drama activity that I choose to do is always one that's going to get the kids working together somehow. I don't do anything that's going to eliminate children that first day. Even if I play an elimination game, they're not eliminated that first day because I want them all working together.
I don't sit and lecture about my rules. I let my students experience my expectations. So I take them through different activities that kind of test and try some of my expectations. I tell stories my first day. I do scenarios. We act out scenarios. So I take them through a typical drama class as we experience the rules. And then we do a warm-up. Always do a warm-up. Just a short one. Again, it's just getting them into your classroom, getting them set up. And then from there, I usually launch right into whatever I'm integrating with. Some sort of big group activity, something we do all together. With my young kids, that's kind of where we hang out. Most of the things we do all together. We're doing it all at once. As I get into the older grades, 4th, 5th, and 6th, we start to divide into groups and having them work in small groups to come up with their ideas. We always end with some sort of performance element. Not necessarily now we all sit and watch each other, but doing whatever activity we've done at full out, full energy, like we're performing for someone even if no one's watching. And then a sit down to say, okay, what did we learn? What did we see? What went well? What kind of reflecting back on what happened?
Normally when the class comes in, they get their name tags on, and then we do a drama activity. I call it an activity rather than a drama game because there are some teachers who are a little, they're playing games. So it's a drama activity, and I tell the students that every activity we play helps them to become better actors in one way or another. And so it's so important to evaluate after your activity and say, how did that help us? What did that activity do for us? How did it teach us to be better actors? And they come up with some amazing ideas. So you always want to evaluate afterwards. And then after the activity, we go on into some kind of improvisational activity. It could be a process drama. It could be a story dramatization. If I'm working with scripts, maybe it's a reader's theater that we're practicing. Maybe it's a puppet show. So there's, whatever else the main activity comes afterwards. So you want to make sure also that you don't take up more than 10 minutes or so with that warm-up activity. Always leave them wanting more. The first thing you want to do is get those curriculum maps from your teachers. In most schools, the grade levels work together to create a curriculum map that every teacher in that grade follows throughout the year. Some of them call it scope and sequence. So whatever your school calls it, get a copy from each grade level. And then go through that map and circle things or highlight them, things that you say, oh, I could do drama with that or drama with this, and get some ideas on what you can do. And then when you go to meet with your teachers in your collaborative meetings, then you're coming with ideas already and you don't get blindsided by a lot of stuff.
And before I go to collaboration, I'll look at that and I'll check and see, okay, what's coming up? And I'll try to brainstorm 3, 4, 5 ideas of lessons or units that I think would be beneficial based on what they're about to study. And I'll present those to the teachers, and then we'll talk about them. Sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, we want to do this one, and it's that easy. They just pick out kind of like a menu exactly what they want to do. Other times they'll bring to me, well, we're actually doing this in the core. Could we come up with something to do with that? If they give me something they want me to integrate that I haven't brainstormed yet, I'll usually say, okay, I'll take that down. I'll go back to my own office, come up with ideas, and then email it back out to them when I've come up with an idea to see how they feel about it, just so that we're not taking up too much time brainstorming together.
I kind of had to understand what I was doing that first year. Planning a month at a time worked well, but a full year was hard for me to see. Although I might come with an idea and say, I can do the phases of the moon with your class, and then I say, oh, well, we're not doing moon until April. So then I might write down next to that April. So in a way, I'm planning different things throughout the year, but for the most part, I'm just doing a month at a time.
Theater, we're so lucky because our art form slips right in with language arts so easily, with history so easily. Your science and math, those ones are going to be trickier, but there's no reason you shouldn't be integrating, even in a small way every day.
So I always start off, take the first month, maybe even the first 2 months, and focus on character and how you create a character. Because to me, that is the basis of drama, is creating that character. I might give them training on pantomiming. How do you pantomime? Being able to visualize what you're pantomiming helps it become more real. So we practice pantomiming. We practice improvisation, because they'll be doing a lot of improvisation. So giving them those tools right up front before you throw them into an integration piece will be very helpful to you. So I would recommend taking the first month or two, but after that, drama has to be about something, right? So why not about the Civil War? Why not about erosion or the phases of the moon or something along those lines? And to be honest, you cannot do drama without integrating into language arts. That's not possible. So everything you do in drama is going to integrate into language arts.
But the more practice you get, the easier it's going to be to make those lighter integrations come in more deeply and really hit on those harder level of integrations. A good way to look at it is if you can talk to your teachers about creating DOK questions. Those are called depth of knowledge questions. That's a really good way to get more true fit integration, when you can have deeper depth of knowledge questions in your lesson.
There are so many lesson plans out on the internet, and drama games galore. And there are drama lesson plans out there. There is of course, the BYU lesson plan site. In Jordan District, we have our own site with lesson plans on it. The BTS people are putting together a site for lesson plans. I love the Kennedy Center lesson plans. But you can even take a regular classroom lesson plan and easily adapt it to drama just by acting things out, getting them up and moving and doing those things rather than sitting and filling out all the worksheets. So there's just a multitude of lesson plans out there. A lot of my ideas also come from picture books. There are many picture books that integrate into the core.
Once you've met with your teachers and they've given you the topics that you want to integrate, now you have to go back and you get to be the creative genius that you are and come up with what you're going to teach. For me, I get my ideas from lots of different sources. I found that my librarian is a great asset to me because she knows a lot of stories and a lot of books. And for theater, having a book as a basis is a great way to launch a lesson from. Remember that good teaching is good teaching. So it's a good idea, if you can, find time to go and watch other great teachers. Not necessarily just other great art teachers, but find a teacher at your school that you really admire her classroom management, or you really admire some of the lessons she's done, and ask your principal if you can take time to go and watch them, because it will give you good ideas on how to manage your own classroom. And it doesn't matter if you're teaching math or art or theater, good teaching is good teaching. Make sure you also make time to go to your BTS collaborations and collaborate with people who are in your art form. And when you go, leave your ego at the door. Sometimes in theater we get in our head that we have to do everything on our own and we have to be brilliant the first time, and it's okay. Come with your problems and your concerns and your worries and, this class is driving me crazy and I just don't know what to do. And if you can come with those things, you're way more likely to fix your problems than if you just keep them to yourself and try to solve them on your own.